women and bards who play politics. These are strange times.
Hello and welcome, my name's Django and today I'll be doing a review of The Witcher 2. In short, The Witcher 2 is an RPG set in a fictional land which kind of resembles the Middle Ages basically, where you play a white-haired kind of 80s pop throwback called Geralt, who's a witcher. Geralt's job as a witcher is quite a mixed bag. He battles evil, he helps kings, he tries to solve plots and political intrigue, he dabbles with witchcraft and the occult and occasionally puts all of that to one side and just gets jiggy with some voluptuous harlot. He's basically a cross between a knight from the ancient age of chivalry, Emperor Palpatine from Star Wars, Rasputin and Frankenstein rolled into one, seemingly with a ferocious libido that you basically don't expect from someone who's dead. So with all this going on, does it actually make The Witcher 2 a better game, or even a good game? Or does it simply become a kind of a mishmash of confusion ending in some rumpy bumpy? Well, let's explore it a little. One of the best aspects of any RPG is the quality of its story, and more specifically its depth and complexity. The Witcher 2 story, which I won't go into any detail about because I'm not really into spoilers, is a very rich and diverse experience, and while its depth did occasionally have me asking who was that again, it's done very well indeed and keeps the overall pace of the game going. There were the odd occasions, mostly in retrospect, when I wondered why certain conversations had happened at all, but on the whole the exposition of the story works really well and keeps you engaged. As the story progresses through a prologue, which is mostly a glorified tutorial really, 3 full chapters and an epilogue, you get to move from one location to another, and despite the fairly regular changes of scenery, the story's pace keeps up. As with most RPGs these days, there's obviously the main story to follow, but there's a very large array of side quests that often bring about decent rewards or in-game achievements. The mistake of a lot of RPGs, that a lot of RPGs make, should I say, is to have these side quests not really have much significance or relevance to the main story. However, The Witcher 2 doesn't make this error and has its quests very much focused around the main story, which in turn gives you a greater immersive experience and keeps you wanting to know what's around the next corner. Now let's talk about the gameplay a little. Gameplay in simple terms is divided into action sequences and dialogue. The dialogue gameplay allows you to make some choices within the framework of the storyline, some of which impact quite heavily upon the actual outcome of certain parts of the story. You can choose who to seduce, who to annoy, or in the later game which side you want to fight for. I won't go into that too much. While this isn't done in a hugely in-depth way, it doesn't really matter too much. It's done well. The action gameplay obviously sees Geralt running around, solving quests, killing enemies and monsters, and generally saving the day. The quests themselves are quite diverse and sometimes have you performing actions outside of the third person view. These include boxing, a dice game, wrestling, that's arm wrestling to you and me, and of course the occasional carnal distraction. On the whole, I didn't find any of the quests annoying, boring, repetitive, or basically becoming a WTF moment in my experience. They were quite well thought out and well paced. Now let's talk about the fighting. Let me put this in a nutshell for you. Fighting in The Witcher 2 does take some getting used to. It isn't a game that you can just pile into a fight, click some stuff randomly and pillage the corpses for loot. Firstly, the game's got quite a free style of fighting, whereby you can rapidly change targets and choose where the next blow should land, whether that's with your spells or with your sword. You have the ability, special abilities called signs that allow you to place traps, shield yourself, stun enemies, etc. that can be used strategically to manage a large number of enemies. Familiarity, should I say, if it's even possible, with these is important not just for survival but also for boss fights too. You can also roll away, parry, block and all sorts of other conventional styles of sword fighting techniques. Why all these combat options? Well, it's because the enemies hurt you, and I mean really hurt you. From the very outset of the game screams at you like a maniac to say it's no weakling and that you'll have to engage your brain and reactions and skill to stay alive, even on normal. Yes, it's a hack and slash, but not a mindless one. You have to work hard in fights to keep some enemies stunned while you fight others, reacting quickly to situations as they develop and switching rapidly from one target to the next. Now this might sound quite frantic, and to start off with it is, but before long you get used to it and the combat becomes a very, very, very strong sound aspect to the game, often with me wanting more and more of it. Once you get the basics, you can start to do special finishing moves that play out in a cinematic style. This isn't intrusive and adds a very large chunk of cool to the overall gaming experience. As you progress through The Witcher 2, you get to use talent points as well to bolster your skills, and these become quite powerful pretty quickly. You can increase the chances of surviving even further with the crafting side of the game, which allows you to make potions, armour, weapons, runes and so on. Crafting puts to use the mountain of materials you find while you're out questing, and you don't often find yourself struggling for ingredients. Unfortunately, this does put an enormous strain on your inventory, which isn't particularly well managed in the way that they've done it. It's kind of set at a standard size, your inventory, and there's a weight allowance for the majority of the game. This was my only real gripe with The Witcher 2, its inventory system. Things like not being able to order things in name type, or by name or whatever. This game kind of needs a bank or a chest for Geralt basically to store stuff in. You get so much, and it's stuff that you don't really know that you need, or you think you might need, or you don't know if you should get rid of it or sell it or destroy it. Before long you realise what's commonly found though, which is some respite. And with respawn timers on things like herbs or monsters, you quickly learn what to get rid of and what to hold on to, and all of that that's made easy with Geralt's meditation ability, which allows you to pass time rapidly. In short, all of these aspects make the gaming experience really fun and in depth without being compulsory either, despite those little niggles. Something that can be tricky for any RPG to achieve. Now, graphically the game, well, it's really well done. In fact, it's often quite breathtaking. There's a lot of detail given to each area you explore, each house you enter, or each cave you tiptoe through. And I can honestly say that at no point I found myself thinking, wait, this looks like the other zone I was in, like you might have experienced in more impotent titles like Dragon Age 2 for example. Everything looks fresh, crisp, and this attention to detail helps spur you on. Sound wise the game is okay, but not much more than that. The music is generally quite good, but at times is a little bit too loud, even with certain things turned down, and occasionally the music can be a little bit out of place with what you're currently doing. There are the occasional sound glitches, but nothing worth mentioning as a major flaw. The in-game noises themselves though are more superior, with the atmospherics in particular, the ones in the forests, are very, very well done, but the sound doesn't really impact massively on your enjoyment or experience in the game. So anyway, let me sum up. The Witcher 2 is a very, very good RPG. I've not had so much fun since the original Dragon Age game. It's got an awful lot to offer, and while there's a few things that take some getting used to, things like the combat, the UI, screens outside of the main gameplay, the lightning fast tutorial tips that just seem to disappear. Oh, and the combat. Oh, hang on, did I mention that already? Well, yeah, I kind of needed to mention it already. It takes some getting used to, but it's well worth it. Basically, it still wins through as a great gaming experience. Okay, so it's not got the sprawling gameplay of Oblivion, but to be blunt, it really doesn't need to. The game manages just fine without it, and through well-designed zones, quest hubs and landscapes, something that RPGs fail at massively, it's got a lot to offer really. After the disappointment of other RPG titles in the past couple of years that weren't able to live up to their own potential, it's great to see a title come out that delivers upon its hype, mostly delivering on its hype. I'll make a confession here, I didn't even like the first Witcher game, like at all, but found this sequel infinitely better in a number of ways. It often felt like Dragon Age Origins did, or Baldur's Gate, or Neverwinter Nights, and by that I meant that I felt fully immersed, I felt fully engaged, and piling on the hours like a 16-year-old in a strip club. Now, there's been a fairly steady stream of technical issues being reported. It would be amiss of me to not mention them, most of which have got workarounds along with one or two minor patches, and there's even more substantial patch out I think next week. But despite that, it's worth persisting with. The Witcher 2 is a rich experience and there's a lot of cool moments in it, and while being an adult game with some adult content, well, albeit often putting women in quite subjective roles with not much more characterisation beyond kind of whore, queen, hag, it struck me as a well balanced, well constructed and well delivered game, which will have me returning to it for more than a few playthroughs. I've got no doubt of that. The game itself is roughly about 30 hours long if you stay with the main quest line, with obviously more or less depending on how many side quests you do, which there are plenty of, and of course what difficulty you play on. So if you want to play at a pace, you can, and if you want to take your time and explore everything, then you can do that too. Neither of it is forced on you. The game very much lends itself to your style of playing and your enjoyment more than anything else, which it achieves more often than not. This might sound short to some people, the length of the game, but if you choose to explore, interact with people outside of the main story and get off the beaten track now and then, you can discover quite a lot, and it becomes a much longer and larger experience. Let's face it, no game is 100% perfect. That's just not going to happen. So stick with it if you're one of those people having problems, or indeed you think by burning through the game at like 17 miles an hour you're going to experience it all. It's worthy of your patience and your time. Anyway, there you go. Those are my thoughts on The Witcher 2. As usual, my scores will appear at the end. If you want to learn more about The Witcher 2, then you can check out the Witcher forum on the website, or if you want to kind of take a look at some of the gameplay, then you can go and have a look at some of my gameplay videos on my YouTube channel. Anyway, until next time, be Ubal, my friends, be Ubal.
Care for a little fornication?
It's time for us to step it up another level now, cause we finished warming up, so we rise up, elevate to maintain, fill up with octane and fan the flame. We regain all the names the enemy took away, and like a green